The wind howled around the old mansion, its many windows rattling like 1,000 glassy eyes watching from within the heavy stone walls. Moss clung to the ancient bricks, damp with the rain that never seemed to leave. The mansion sat isolated, perched on the edge of a desolate hill, with no neighbors for miles around. It was a house lost in time, trapped between its walls, much like the two sisters who lived inside. Lucy and Sophie, both with long dark hair and pale skin, were the only signs of life that ever stirred within the mansion. Lucy was the elder by 2 years, a mere 12 years old, though she often felt much older. Sophie, 10, followed her sister everywhere. The two girls shared an eerie closeness, one that made them inseparable from dawn till dusk. They were alone more often than not. Though they spoke of their parents, Lucy and Sophie hardly ever saw them. They couldn't quite remember the last time they had. The house, with its endless corridors and countless rooms, provided a world of its own, a timeless void in which the girls lived. They knew every nook and cranny, every creaking floorboard, and every shadow that danced in the dim candlelight they carried through the halls. Their days passed slowly, as if the outside world moved on without them. The seasons changed, but the air inside the mansion stayed cold and still. The girls filled their time with games, stories, and exploring the house's forgotten spaces. But it was the attic where their adventure truly began. The discovery. The attic was a forbidden place, or so their parents had said. But one stormy afternoon, when the rain drummed incessantly on the roof, Lucy and Sophie found themselves drawn to the dusty staircase that led to the house's highest floor. Their curiosity had gnawed at them for days, and today, the call of the attic was too strong to resist. The door creaked open, revealing a space full of forgotten relics. Old trunks, broken furniture, and boxes piled high with the remnants of other lives. Dust swirled in the air, stirred by the girls' footsteps as they moved slowly through the clutter. Sophie sneezed, the sound echoing like a tiny explosion in the silent space. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice hushed with awe. "I don't know," Lucy whispered back, her eyes scanning the room. "It's like a graveyard for old things." They continued to explore, their fingers trailing over dusty books and tarnished silver. It was Lucy who found the box. Hidden beneath a tattered, moth-eaten blanket, it was small and wooden, its surface engraved with strange symbols neither of them recognized. "Look," Lucy said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is it. This is something special." Sophie knelt beside her sister, her small hands trembling as Lucy opened the box. Inside, nestled in the folds of decaying velvet, was an old Ouija board. The game begins. They decided to try it that very night. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of their bedroom, with only a single candle flickering between them, Lucy and Sophie set the board between them. The planchette, small and heart-shaped, lay ominously on top. "We can't let them know," Lucy whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet of the room. "They wouldn't like it." Sophie nodded, biting her lip nervously. "Do you think it will work?" Lucy's eyes glinted with excitement. "There's only one way to find out." They placed their fingers lightly on the planchette, just as the instructions had said. Lucy's breath caught in her throat as she whispered the words. "Is anyone there?" For a long moment, nothing happened. The candle flickered, casting long shadows across the walls, but the board remained still. Sophie began to giggle nervously, but before she could say anything, the planchette jerked beneath their fingers. Both girls froze, their eyes wide, as the small piece of wood slowly began to move.
Y-E-S.
Sophie's breath hitched, and Lucy's grip tightened on the planchette. "It's working," Lucy whispered. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were no longer playing a game. something was answering them. "Who are you?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling slightly. The planchette moved again, slowly at first, but then more confidently.
M-O-T-H-E-R.
Sophie's eyes filled with confusion. "Mother," she repeated, glancing at Lucy. "But that can't be. Maybe it's someone else," Lucy said quickly, her mind racing. "Ask another question." "What do you want?" Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. The board remained silent for a long time. The girls exchanged nervous glances. Then, slowly, the planchette began to move once more.
T-A-L-K.
The obsession. From that night on, the Ouija board became an obsession. Every evening after the house had fallen into its eerie stillness, Lucy and Sophie would light a candle and sit together in the dark. Their fingers would hover over the planchette, and the spirit would come to them, ready to talk. At first, they asked simple questions. "Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here?" The answers were cryptic, often short and vague. But they kept coming. Every night, the spirit was there, waiting for them. It claimed to be their mother at times, though the girls quickly dismissed that possibility. Their mother, as far as they knew, was downstairs somewhere, living in her own quiet world. The spirit, whoever it was, knew things about the house, things the girls themselves had forgotten. It described rooms and objects that neither Lucy nor Sophie had ever noticed, prompting them to explore new parts of the mansion in the daylight hours. "We're learning so much," Sophie said one afternoon as they wandered through a long-forgotten wing of the house, their hands trailing along the dust-covered walls. "It feels like the house is talking to us." Lucy nodded, but there was a shadow behind her eyes. The more they communicated with the spirit, the more it seemed to know them intimately, as if it had always been there, watching them. The turning point. The messages grew stranger as the days passed. The spirit began speaking in riddles, asking the girls to remember things they didn't understand. It referred to times and places that didn't seem to exist. "Do you think it's lying to us?" Sophie asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper as they sat before the Ouija board once again. Lucy shook her head. "No, I think it's trying to tell us something. We just have to figure it out." That night, the spirit's message was longer than usual. The planchette moved quickly, spelling out words before the girls had a chance to process them.
Lucyphie.
Lucy stared at the board, her heart pounding in her chest. It knows our names," she whispered. "We've never told it our names," Sophie said, her voice shaking. "How does it know?" Lucy didn't answer. She was already asking the next question. "Who are you?" There was a long pause, and then the planchette moved once more.
Family.
The air in the room grew colder. The candle flickered wildly as if caught in a sudden gust of wind, though the windows were tightly shut. "Family," Sophie repeated, her voice cracking. "What does that mean?" Lucy didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the board, her face pale in the candlelight. The planchette moved again, slowly this time, as if the spirit was choosing its words carefully.
Y-O-U.
The girls stared at the board, their minds struggling to comprehend what the spirit was telling them. "You," Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What does that mean?" The planchette trembled beneath their fingers, then moved once more.
D-E-A-D.
The truth. The room seemed to grow impossibly still in that moment. The flickering candlelight no longer danced on the walls. Instead, the shadows seemed to stretch, reaching toward the girls like ghostly fingers. Lucy and Sophie sat frozen, their hands still resting on the planchette, their minds reeling. "We're not dead," Sophie said, her voice shaking with fear. "That's not possible." Lucy's throat was dry, her heart hammering in her chest. But somewhere deep inside, she felt a terrible understanding creeping up on her. The memories, the fragments of forgotten time, the strange sense of isolation began to piece themselves together. The house had always been empty, hadn't it? The two of them, always alone, always together. Their parents, where had they gone? Why couldn't they remember? Lucy's hands trembled as she spoke the next words. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The planchette moved slowly, deliberately.
2 5 Y E A R S.
The breath left Lucy's lungs in a sudden rush. 25 years. They had been dead for 25 years. Tears filled Sophie's eyes. But how? Why don't we remember? The board remained silent for a long moment, and then the final message came, etched into the silence like a scar.
PARENTS.
Lucy's hands dropped from the planchette, and she pulled Sophie into a tight embrace. The truth hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. They had been the spirits all along. The board hadn't connected them with some distant ghost. It had bridged the gap between the living and the dead. Their parents had been trying to reach them, just as Lucy and Sophie had unknowingly reached back. The realization settled over them like a suffocating fog. The house was their prison, a place where time had stopped and they had lingered, unaware of their fate. They were the ghosts haunting the mansion. And now, finally, they knew. The candles sputtered out, plunging the room into darkness, leaving Lucy and Sophie alone with the terrible truth, lost in the silence of a home that had never been theirs to leave.